everybody is feeling okay. We've got a little bit of winter weather coming on, a little bit cold, a little bit of drizzle. We've enjoyed nice weather, what I would call an early fall. But anyways, I'll call the meeting to order and acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Before I call for adoption of the agenda, just a couple of items here to let the directors know is Director Cunningham will be joining us lately. He's had a doctor's appointment. And alternate director for New Denver, John Fife, will also be joining us a little bit later. So I will acknowledge when they join us. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Okay, I see Jackman and Weatherhead. Anybody opposed to adopting the agenda? Seeing no opposition, it's carried. And we have received the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? Looking at chat, I see something in chat. Hang on a
That's
second.
me. Just
Okay.
letting them know.
Okay, so no comments on the minutes, so they've been received. And purchase of loader for Central Subregion, item number 3. And we'll call on Larry Brown to speak to that item. Please go ahead, Larry.
Thank you, and through the chair. Before I start, though, I just wanted to introduce Mark Braithwaite. He is our purchasing agent. I've invited Mark to be part of this because he was instrumental in the creation of the criteria and the evaluation waiting the document that's in front of you. So, and if there's questions that I can't answer,
Thank you, Larry, and welcome, Mark.
So, a bit of background on this. We were tasked with starting the process of hiring a loader, and so Mark and I worked quite closely to establish the criteria for what we were looking for, which is included in your document, as well as the rating of how we were going to rate it and what we were going to rate it on. So, this is a lot of the why we did it, and what we got. But I want to explain as to why we came to the rating that we did. So we received 6 submissions, which is a good, helpful market out there, and much appreciated. And then when we went through the submissions, this whole process took a couple weeks. So a lot of the information that we were sent was not complete, lacks in detail. So we had to do a bit of back and forth with the various suppliers. But at the end of it, two loaders and specifically rose to the top, which is the K621G and the Hyundai HL948. And the reason for that is, even though there's a slight difference on the cost, is because of some specific criteria that had a very higher rating than usual. The main one is a warranty. 4 of the suppliers supplied us with a 1-year warranty. These 2 gave us a 3-year, 3,000-hour warranty, and we placed a higher rating on that because a good warranty actually translates into lower operating costs and also potentially less downtime for the loader. The case also got additional weighting because they had a short lead time. They said they could deliver within a week. The Hyundai was 45 days or less. And then the main one that the case got a fair amount of rating for was under the criteria of parts and service and maintenance work. And the reason we gave a high rating to this is that, warranty work cost is entirely borne by the manufacturer. All other repair work is charged out at whatever the rate is, including travel time. And we, a case text, for instance, that's based in Castlegar is assumed to be significantly cheaper than a Hyundai tech that is dispatched from Kamloops. And over a course of a number of years, that cost will be substantial. The other thing that the case suppliers provided that we did not give a rating to because we didn't ask for it was a comprehensive maintenance plan. Case, as part of their sales program, offers a service called ProCare, that's their name, which every unit that they sell comes with a 2,000-hour maintenance program, including basically a visit to the unit every 100 hours, and then prescribed in their intervals such as 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000. They will come to your site and they will change the oils and the fluids and filters, and that was not something we asked for, but they provided. They did not give us a cost for this. We estimated it to be $20,000 for that, because we did ask Hyundai for a similar program, and they costed their program $22,600. So in actual fact, the 303 that's listed in price could actually be reduced because you're getting additional service. So if you were to account for that $20,000 of the comprehensive maintenance plan in your notes here on the pro side for the case, it said it would actually increase their points to 82.42. So rather than be tied, they actually have more points based on that plan. So based on the overall criteria that we rated it on and where the service is located and on the life cycle management of this unit, we recommend that the case be purchased.
Well, thank you. Before I asked Director Newell, Chair of Central, to move that recommendation, does anybody have any questions? I see 3 hands up. 4. Okay, so Director Newell?
No, I'll wait.
Director Lockwood?
Thank you. And through the chair, I just have one question. The $22,000 that you were just talking about for the program, maintenance program, was that for 2 years or was that per time that they would come out?
For 2,000 hours. So that was the life of, they would provide service up to 2,000 hours. And that was an additional cost of $22,000. That's for the Hyundai that you're talking about.
So the case was 2,000 hours that they were giving.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what you were asking for was the exact same thing. So that's what I'm asking is the $22,000 for the whole 2,000 hours?
Through the chair to the director, yes.
Okay.
Okay, the supplemental, Director Lockwood?
No, I just want to, because that still makes it cheaper.
Thank you. Director Page?
Thanks, Chair. The question is to Mark, through the chair, on the technical criteria that you created to evaluate. I was looking at the emissions profile of the 2 engines for the Hyundai and the case, and I'm wondering where that might have fallen if in some of the subcategories you have technical specifications. Did we look at emissions?
Through the chair, for these specific loaders, we did not look at the emissions. Some of the preliminary work we had done beforehand was to look at actual the market for EV or electric loaders. We did a little bit of research. Unfortunately, the technology isn't quite there for the size of loader we're looking for. Some of the manufacturers do offer small ones, but not the size we're going for.
So just supplemental.
Supplemental,
For clarity, I was looking at the Tier 4 emission standards that the case meets, whereas the Hyundai meets the European Stage 5 NOx emissions and general carbon emission output for diesel that it consumes. I'm just wondering, when we look at our fleet purchases, we're starting to make those evaluations, not just on the zero emission side, but performance and emission side as well, meeting some of those higher targets around the world.
Through the chair noted, that's a good comment. And that's an evaluation that we think.
Okay. And I have a second question.
Go ahead.
It's a little bigger than that. So this is probably to you, Larry. When we're looking at how we manage the fleet as a whole, and looking at these maintenance agreements, I'm just comparing how when we get this kind of reporting from the city of Nelson, we look at the fleet as a whole. We have a capital budget for the fleet as a whole, and we make decisions in the budgetary season around which vehicles within that entire fleet you're prioritizing for replacement. And I'm wondering, are we starting to move towards that as an organization here? Is that something that we can start to look at what is happening across our fleet and versus these individual purchases coming up in individual services? That might be more for Stuart, but.
Sure. So the asset management plan is in its early stages. This is certainly one of those items that will be addressed in that. And then in regards to our services in particular, obviously they're standalone. Central's basically, the other services have bins, but this is the only service that has loaders and trucks and things. So it is combined to the central service. So at budget time, we've forecasted what we need in the way of roll-up bins, compacting trailers, tractor trailers, and loaders. So we've done it preliminarily, but we've been sort of waiting to not do a process when the asset management plan will quickly be taking some of that on.
Okay, and then the chairs, one last.
Okay, go ahead.
Then I'll have my answer. When I hear about pro maintenance package on a brand new vehicle with full warranty, it gets me back to not just how we manage the assets, but what our maintenance program across them looks like, and how we have that capacity within our own shops to execute on oil changes and things I was doing when I was 12, running around greasing knuckle joints and swapping out parts and making sure filters are done. The pro package sounds attractive, but to me, I wonder about our own capacity to be doing that work and whether or not when we're buying part of a fleet strategy, we will probably stick with a particular brand so we have certification within that brand.
Thank you, Director Page. Larry, I believe you got a response.
Through the director through the chair to the director, we do not have internal capacity. All our maintenance and services done by local shops. We do not have internal capacity.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for your response. I don't want to cut you off. But we will have to move on. Amy has a comment to make. Go ahead.
Just quickly, so actually on Friday this week, I'm meeting with the engineers to go over the initial launch for the detailed design for the Grumman-Yarrows expansion. So this year will be the design for the site expansion and the recycling area consolidation construction for next year. And then next year we'll start on the design for the fleet building as part of that project. So we are investigating how far we'll take that fleet building, if it's only going to be the heated storage for those compacting trailers and some indoor storage, or if we will expand the capacity to do some mechanical services, whether that's ours only or been networking with other departments to discuss possibly sharing some maintenance services or have that be a base for some remote mechanical services. Very preliminary, and that'll be next year's design. So.
Okay, thanks
we are looking at maybe moving more into that.
Thank you. All good questions, Director Page. It's something to move forward on with our assessment plan that we're doing. So Director Jackman, and then I've got Director Neal and Director Green.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just looking ahead a few months when we'll be looking at budgets. And so the one unit is 14% more money than the other. If it's under warranty for 3 years or so many thousand hours, again, I think it was already covered. Why would we buy another superior maintenance program on top of that instead of just maybe accepting that, yeah, we grease and change oil and do stuff that so many of us have machines. The chair has a machine, he probably does his own maintenance on it. So not everything requires a case certified technician or a Hyundai certified technician. So where do we get a little bit of a break where we can actually accept something a little cheaper? Would Hyundai say that the warranty is void if they don't have their people do certain very rudimentary work like greasing the thing and changing oil? Because I like to have a real good reason why I tell taxpayers, yeah, we paid 14% more because this has a couple extra layers of protection that we may or may not even need if it's a quality machine. Would we void a warranty if we said we're going to assume that in a couple of years we can look after our own machines?
Good question, and that is a good question. Will the warranty be voided if you use somebody else to do the servicing at a lower cost?
Through the chair, so there are specific tasks, oil sampling, certain milestones that you have to do to ensure the warranty remains intact. If local people can do it versus their own techs, probably. I don't have that answer exactly. I don't have the specifics of who locally would actually work on that machine.
Thank you. And I presume that we'll be looking at it in our asset management plan?
Yes, through the chair, that, ongoing maintenance. That's one thing looking at this item, the life cycle cost of it. is when we're paying to have a tech from, so what we understand is that, and Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some techs won't work on units that they're not certified to do, as well as it may, there might be some work that we could do that could be done by a certified tech, but I think there is some work that certainly has to be done by a case or a Hyundai tech. And when we look at the life cycle, having someone come up from Kamloops and sort of we had estimated about even just a single trip is around $5,000. And that's only if they have all the tools the parts that they need and don't have to make a second trip. So we were looking at about $5,000 a year in service after the warranty period. And that catches up quite quickly when that $4,000 to $5,000 isn't in the travel cost of the person that's coming from Castlegar. So that life cycle costing really weighed into what we're looking at, and beyond the 3,000 hour warranty, that's where it would all come out of pocket from us.
No, thank you, Amy. Director Newell, I had you as the first person on a speaker's list, but there's Director Graham that's next. So is it okay if I go with Director Graham after the response from Larry?
I think, we hear from Larry first.
Yeah, I said after the response from Larry.
Through the chair to the director. These newer vehicles are a lot different than the older loaders that are out there. We currently operate 4 loaders that range in age from 1993 to 2006, 2012, and the most recent one that you purchased in 2020. The first 2, no technology, all mechanical, easy to work on, anybody can work on. A little bit of technology on the 2012. On the 2020 that you purchased for the Volvo, for the compost facility, there's 7 onboard computers. And the first thing that a mechanic does when they show up on site is they don't pick up the wrenches, they pick up their computer and they log into the machine to see what's wrong with it. A lot of the software is proprietary, so when there's a discussion about someone else looking after it, a lot of manufacturers will not make that software available to every shop. And that's the first thing, like they say, they look at. There's a lot of technology on this one as well, too, and a whole bunch of sensors. So from my point of view, what's going to go wrong with it is those computers and those sensors, and that's experience telling me that.
So I guess the point the directors were trying to make was that taken into consideration from what I understand from you? It was. It's not a simple go out there and change oil and drop the oil filter off or whatever. So I've got Director Graham and then Director Newell. Go ahead.
So thank you through the chair. I'm really just going to make a comment. I've been working with equipment for 20 years in my private life. If this was a case brought to my business, we would purchase the Hyundai. We've had good experiences with the Hyundai. The Hyundai has a better reputation typically from the contractors that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And the price, like for the price, that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Director Newell.
I'd like to move the recommendation as stated in the agenda and comment on it.
And do we have a seconder? Did you have your hand up there?
Yes, I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't waving tight enough.
Yeah.
But I think if I may, through the chair, I think you just about answered my last question. What is the average life of the loaders that we're getting in these machines? 20, 25, 30 years old? Do you expect some of our new ones to be able to last as long? Or should I maybe ask it the other way? What's the shortage like loader we have when we buy these cars?
I can't speak to that. Sorry, through the director. I can't speak to that because I haven't been here that long. We don't work our loaders really hard. We'll age them up before we'll wear them out. So.
Thank you. Director Newell, you've moved the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? I've got a seconder, Director Watson. Now, discussion.
Well, I'd like to.
Go ahead, discussion.
Okay. Notwithstanding the comments that we heard, I think that our purchasing department and staff have had the case come out ahead and potentially even way more ahead. I asked before the meeting if the 20,000 or 22,000, why it wasn't included, but it wasn't in the proposal, therefore it can't be part of the rating, but it adds an additional value to the evaluation score to 82 point something percent. And like if it evaluates higher, most times I think we would go with the one that's evaluated the highest. So therefore, I move the recommendation and support the recommendation as written in the report.
Thank you, Director Neal. Any further discussion? Director Vanderberg.
So I've dealt in equipment all my life as well, and I have an understanding as to what the new technology is doing and how you have to be sensitive to it. Don't get me wrong. I do agree with Director Graham, though, on this. The things that I would look at is where is it going to be serviced out of? It's going to be Castle Park, the Highland. Okay, but the other thing I look at is resale. What is the opportunity for resale in terms of the valuation? The matrix here is really good, but I don't see that in here. And I think that that should be weighed in because that could influence your conversation. For example, your Volvo might have a better resale than the John Deere. I have a personal bias on that, but I'm not going to throw that on the table. As a result of my knowledge, I would be going with the Hyundai. And I think we'd be perfectly fine with it. And I think the savings ought to be passed on to our taxpayers.
Thank you, Director, for your comment. And I've seen Amy make the notes here for future considerations. So we have a motion on the table. It'll be moved, seconded. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 opposed?
5 on the screen.
Okay, 5 on the screen. Help me count. Hold your hands up high.
Oh, wait, 6 now on the screen.
Okay, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 defeated.
I'll move this second recommendation.
I'll second the second recommendation.
And what is the second recommendation?
The Hyundai, option 2.
Okay, Director Page moved the second recommendation, which is, can you read that out?
Yeah, I'm just got off the page. That the board authorize staff to purchase a Hyundai H940A loader from Woodland Equipment Inc. up to total cost of $26,570 excluding taxes.
And we have a seconder? Discussion? Seeing nothing online and nobody in the room. Comments on
That the end further the chair and corporate officer will be authorized to sign the necessary documents and further that the cost be paid from Service S28 Central Register included in that.
So you did not read the and further, so the and further was read by Amy. And that's part of the motion. Wait, no further discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. Okay, we're moving on to item number 4, hydrogen Nakusp landfill, and Heidi. You're online? You've got the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, and through the chair. In addition to annual reports that document operations and environmental monitoring results at landfills, the operational certificate for Nakusp landfill requires the RDCK to submit a more comprehensive report that includes a detailed hydrogeological assessment, as well as an updated design and operations plan to the ministry every 5 years. As part of this regulatory reporting requirement and to help guide the final closure plan for Nakusp, the SLR Consulting was procured to complete the hydrogeology and hydrology assessment report for this site. The report identified groundwater at the site is impacted by landfill leachate in the immediate vicinity of the landfill, where there appears to be a general trend of increasing leachate potency over time. Water quality improves with distance from the landfill, indicating that natural attenuation is largely mitigating impacts to receptors down gradient of the landfill. Concentrations of all parameters meet the compliance criteria at the farthest down gradient monitoring well, which is technically off-site based on the current definition of the site, but on RDCK property. To ensure that water quality does not exceed the applicable criteria at or beyond the site boundary as required by the landfill's operational certificate, SLR recommends a redefinition of the site boundary to include the RDCK-owned land that the new transfer station was constructed on. This report has been forwarded to Sperling Hansen team, who is in the process of drafting the fill to closure and the final closure plans for this site, such that these recommendations can be incorporated into the eventual amendment application for the operational certificate at the site. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, Chair, I have a question.
Yes, we've got Director Weatherhead, Director Jackman, and Director Davidoff. Go ahead, Director Weatherhead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I read over the report. It's really an excellent report, very informative. How far from the Kuskonax Creek actually does it sit? Because it's quite close, but if we're only talking about groundwater leachate, I always was under the impression that it was quite close to the creek, and I thought perhaps that was more concerning. So I was relieved to hear this, but how close actually is it in proximity to our creek?
Through the chair, I'd have to read through the report again. I want to say it was about 3 kilometers, but I can confirm that by email after once I reread the report.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it's 3 kilometers, but okay, thank you. I can look at the map and figure it out. Thank you.
Okay, Director Jackman.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I spent too much time on this stuff, so I actually looked through all the results. Having seen, I like to see the trends, improvement, and stuff like that. I got down to page 164. I kind of wish I'd started there. That's the concentration versus time. And this says revision 0, which kind of suggests to me that maybe the consultant could add a little value to this report. I would add value by putting those from 164 onwards, so it's ammonia, chloride, nitrate, sulfate at the top as right below an executive summary. And on each one of them, show the acceptable baseline value right across the timeline. Because what we'll see is almost all of the monitoring wells, there's no issue. And it took me dozens of pages and dozens more pages of looking at charts, sort of flipping back and forth, difficult to read. And those few images they have, if you had that chloride, you'd have seen that all of the wells were below whatever that number is, 5, 6. If we had a line across here saying acceptable is 10, I'd get a glance and say, oh, great. The only place we have is immediately adjacent to the waste site. So if they're going to do any tweaking to this, I'd love to see that really simple kind of analysis. And that's something the public can hone in on if they have an interest in, while you're contaminating the ground. They could look at 3 pages and see a dozen images that tell the whole story. That, yeah, right at the waste site, we're contaminating the ground beyond that.
Thank you, Director. That was just a comment, and Heidi, Amy, yeah, you want to respond to that comment at all, or?
Yeah, through the chair. So we have requested that in the past, and what came back was that those criteria over time have changed. And even right now, the criteria that the compliance criteria as per our OC and the compliance criteria recommended to be used by the consultant are different. And so there is no one criteria basically across that entire time period that can be used as the baseline. The tables reflect that. They show the multiple different criteria that are being applied at the site, but unfortunately it would be really difficult to show the varying criteria on the graph. But that's what the tables of the report are for.
Well, thank you for your response, and I'm looking at Director Jackman.
Tables are very complex if you actually want to try to digest it. Drinking water guidelines and aquatic, only those 2 lines on those charts, to me would tell most of the story. People are always concerned, what are my kids drinking? And then we're all concerned, what is the impact on fisheries? And I would imagine any Indigenous groups would want to see those 2 things as well. So anyway, I do appreciate the answer. Our operating certificate's 10 years old. So yeah, a lot has changed.
Well, thank you for your comment. Director David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question deals with the first page of the report. And I guess my question is probably to CAO Horn through the chair. We did a hydrological assessment in 2016. Plan was drafted in 2018. However, we didn't finalize the plan and we didn't submit a formal 5-year report to the ministry. Then on September of 2019, the ministry issues a non-compliance advisory letter noting non-compliance about the annual and the 5-year report requirements. So then what we do is we said that due to significant staffing shortages, the regulatory reporting requirements were not able to be met in 2019. Then we hire an environmental technologist and resource recovery projects advisor in early 2023. So there's 4 years between 2019 and 2023. Like, why didn't we do all this stuff? Like, am I missing something here, or is the timeline accurate? And like, we're talking about a lot of years that we weren't doing one of the most important things that we're supposed to do in a land. How did we end up with this situation? Like, maybe Stuart can explain it to us through the chair.
Well, thank you, Director David. If I don't know if Amy can make a comment on that.
Stuart to explain.
I don't think, Stuart's online too, so we'll let Amy make a comment and then Stuart can weigh in.
Thank you, through the chair. All of the environmental monitoring was being completed and the quarterly reporting was being submitted to the province. There were some reporting timelines that were delayed. We had a variety of staff leave. We had someone come and was only here for a few months. And so we had, as the report identifies, staffing shortages that really delayed some of these reports.
Thank you, Amy. And Stuart, the question was directed at you. Do you want to respond?
Through the chair, I don't have anything further to add. Local governments work within the resources we've got to try to get things accomplished as quickly as we can. And in this case, we were doing the monitoring, which I think is the more important thing as opposed to the reporting. And we got the reporting done as soon as we possibly could.
Okay, supplemental, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Director David.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to remember if we were informed of this, because this is a West Resource Recovery landfill. Were we informed of these issues all along? Because I'm trying to think back that we had this problem, that we had these we had this non-compliance letter. Were we advised of that, like, back then? Through the chair.
I don't have an answer for you, Director Davidoff, and I don't know if staff has an answer for you.
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have an answer for you. Maybe you can possibly take it offline with Uli and find out the procedures that we were used and why we were informed or not informed.
Okay, am I the only one that's concerned about this? Because then I'll stop. Because I think our JRCC should and our WRCC should know about this kind of stuff, but I guess we'll just leave it there then. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Director David. Director Vanderberg and Director Page, do you have a comment?
Thank you, through the chair. And just reading between the lines with Director Davidoff, I don't know that too many times we're encouraged to take it offline, go and have a singular chat. And I miss out on the value of that because this is potentially a risk liability. To say, discuss it elsewhere. No, I believe that needs to be determined, that needs to be understood here. So that's just the only question, that's the only comment I want to throw in here. And too many times it's, we'll take it offline, we'll take it. No, we're a group, we need to be learning from this, taking responsibility for this as a group, and so on. So just a comment.
Thank you for your comment, Director Page, and then Director Weatherhead.
Brief, fast comments in succession. Heidi, great job. The report in 4.3 says 3 kilometers plus for the drainage upstream from the creek mentioned by Weatherhead. I know the requirement the requirement for reporting on the various regulatory needs, I think we probably could have a conversation later about that as across the organization, because there's a lot of different reporting requirements, and keeping track of them and how that's done operationally is always a moving target. I know Nelson has at times prioritized the collection of monitoring data for its water quality and not annually completed the reporting for those, and those slip off people's tables. So I'd be interested to see what our approach is across the organization on how we track and ensure, and when we're making those trade-offs and making accountability, you know, that's coming out of budgets. That's making choices to have and support staff to meet all those workload requirements. So those are my comments.
Director Weatherhead.
I'm just noticing that the wells that are noted here on Alexander Road and Shakespeare Road, those are all much higher elevation than the dump elevation. And so those wells couldn't possibly be that deep, could they? Like, in this, because as far as I know, how our waterways run for Alexander and Shakespeare Roads, those are all coming down from Mount Jordan, and not from the Kooskanak, which is much lower elevation. So I'm really confused by this.
Is that a question to Heidi?
I guess it is. I just don't, I don't see the relation of these water wells to this dump. And they're also on the other side of the Kooskanak, not even on the side of the dump. So it just seemed these are just odd. If there had been wells down in McCusk or in the highway, then I would see the relation, but I don't see the relation to these particular wells.
Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, through the chair. I apologize. I'm not familiar with the wells by street name because it's not documented in the report, and I'm not super familiar with McCusk, but the wells that they chose to document or refer to when describing nearby potential water that could be impacted is based on distance from the site. I think they usually typically use a radius of 1 kilometer from the site when they're doing hydrogeological studies and identify any significant surface water points, surface water diversion points, or groundwater wells that are within 1 kilometer of the site. So wells that were documented in the report would simply be in there because they're within that distance from the site.
Here I have
Supplement.
Yeah. So we've run into this before where people look at a map and they deem our geography flat. And we've had all of these elevation issues, even from Ministry of Transportation, that approved 2 PLRs on the same plot of land, causing a 5-meter drop off to one property if they had gone through. So elevations are super important in the way I look at these things, because this doesn't really ring, none of these wells noted here are, I don't see how any of them could be affected by any, even if there was leachate beyond whatever is stated here. And I also don't believe that dump is 3 kilometers from the Kooskanaks, 440 meters. Is that 3 kilometers?
No.
No, 440 meters is what it is. So, anyways, I'm just kind of a bit perplexed by those particular wells being noted as factual points in a report. And when they're not, they can't be factual.
So thank you, Director Weather. Seeing a lot of questions and on process, etc. And Director Vanderberg and Director David have brought this up. Maybe we should refer this item for till the November board meeting and have a more comprehensive report on it with a recommendation.
Sure. Through the chair, if I may. So these are qualified professionals and they follow guidance by either their association or the province. And often this is what's regulated by the province when we're looking at them. There's pretty specific guidelines for which areas to consider. It's just similar to whether or not it's a drinking water well or not. You still have to apply the drinking water standards to them. So the elevation, without looking at the borehole logs which are included, you know, even though the well head might be at the very top of a hill, it could still, if it's in the down gradient flow path, it still could be affected depending on how deep that well is. So without getting more into it, I think that they had to assess wells based on that kilometer radius, regardless of, sometimes it's even wells that are upstream. I mean, then in the recommendations, they can identify these wells we've demonstrated are upstream. So,
Sorry, not even, hi.
they still have to include them in the data set, but in the recommendations, they describe as to whether or not they feel that they're affected.
Okay, now I'm developing a speakers list on a report that's being received for information only. There is no recommendation associated with this report. So, Director David up here, for the second time speaker, I'll go to the first time speakers first, and I have Director Cunningham and I have Director Watson. Director Cunningham.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, perhaps number 4 has some relationship to number 5. And I was going to say, does the changing of the insurance have anything to do with perhaps the location of the wells or the amount of insurance that's necessary?
No, and I see Amy shaking her head, no. Thank you. Director Watson.
I was just going to suggest that there are questions that do need answers that we don't have right now. And although it's receipt of the report and there's no motion to move on it, we could request that those that have outstanding questions, such as the ones that, I don't recall who raised it, but around the liability on this, Director Davidoff, sorry. If those questions could come back as a separate report in November that addresses those questions from, you know, between staff and the consultant or the engineers who did this, and then we'll get the answers. So that would be the request I would suggest to staff, is get the answers to the questions that are outstanding, and then we bring those back in November, but not bring the report back necessarily, just make sure we're answering the questions we can answer to.
So, thank you, Chair Watson. We have Director Davidoff, and then we will make a decision.
Thank you, Chair. The question that Director Weatherhead asked about well location was a question I asked when the Odishanya landfill wells were drilled. And I asked, why would there be wells sort of where they were located? And the answer from the consultants was really surprising and interesting. Apparently, the middle aquifer in Odishanya, which is the main water supply for Odishanya, and which provides the pure water that's not treated in any way, is actually directly against the water flow from the landfill. There's no physical boundary, it's pneumatic pressure that the consultants, the engineers looked at and said, this is why we're drilling wells not below. We drilled wells below the landfill, but we're drilling them to the sides because the middle aquifer pneumatic pressure is what keeps the middle aquifer safe from the leachates. So again, it's a technical explanation. It was fascinating. And I don't know if that's the same case here or not, but sometimes, you know, you're looking at things that we don't understand without delving into them deeper. So, like, who knew that pneumatic pressure was the safe barrier for the middle aquifer in Odishanya from the leachate in the landfill? So just that could be something applied here. But again, these are the conversations that we should be having at a resource recovery meeting. I think there are questions here. I like Chair Watson's suggestion that if anyone has more questions, that, you know, we could get a supplemental report with some information at our next meeting. But I think they're extremely valid questions on any report that we deal with, and particularly when it comes to leachate from a landfill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Davidoff, and I do like the suggestion Chair Watson brought forward, so I will entertain a recommendation with direction to staff to basically bring back either a report or information answering all the questions that were posed here today.
And procedurally, we don't need a motion if staff understands what the direction is. So if Amy's good with it and Heidi's good with it, you can just make it a direction to staff.
Pretty good with that
Pretty
direction?
sure, yes, I might check in with director on whether or not to ensure I know which wells she's speaking of. I think I've got the map here and I can confirm that. And Director David, those concerns are around the reporting timelines, and I think that's pretty straightforward.
Okay, and that would be direction to staff to bring it back for the November meeting?
We can do our best to do that, yes.
Or December meeting, or, I mean, how much time will staff to go back, do that in view of the work that we have to move forward on?
For the chair, some of it depends on the depth of the question and the availability of the consultants. I don't imagine it would be that hard. I don't know that this warrants a full report. It might just be a verbal,
Okay, so it would be a direction to staff to bring back answers to all the questions that were posed today for the November meeting, if possible. If not, then if it's going to interfere with the schedule that we have with our joint resource recovery, then the December meeting. Anybody opposed to that? I see no opposition, so that's a direction to staff then.
Thank you, Director.
Director Weatherhead.
I would be happy with just a conversation because some of these wells don't even exist anymore.
I can't hear you.
I would be happy with a conversation because some of these wells, some of these people are on village water now and they're not on wells anymore. So I think maybe they're irrelevant.
Just to clarify, I think it's great for you to speak directly with Amy, but the committee's actually wanting to hear back as well.
No,
So
I'm okay with the status quo.
okay.
Okay, so on process, do we need a motion to that effect?
Amy understands what we're doing and it's not actually, the only thing is just in a bit, I would understand if November wasn't possible because November board has actually moved up a week.
Yep.
So just giving them the time to get the answers they need. I think Director Daywell had more questions and Vandenberg indicated he wanted to hear them back. So I think that works if Amy feels like she's clear.
Okay. Are you clear on the questions that were posed, or do you want them to email them to you?
Emails would be preferred, yeah.
Okay, so email your questions to Amy and they will try to bring it back for the November meeting. And like I mentioned before, is if their workload is heavy, they can't bring it back, it'll come back in December. Okay, so can we move on to the next item? Item number 5. And that's Nathan's item. Go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear? Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, the purpose of this report is to outline a proposed insurance modification for Sperling Hansen Associates Incorporated for the Nakusp Closure Planning Project. As you know, closure planning at the Nakusp landfill is about to commence as the new transfer station is now constructed and will be operational in the near future. A request for proposal was issued to the RDCK Resource Recovery Standing Offer Group in July 2024, and Sperling Hansen was selected as the consulting firm to complete the closure planning. This was based on their extensive experience working with the RDCK on landfill projects, and also based on substantially lower pricing as compared to the other proponents. The cost proposal for Sperling Hansen to complete the project was valued at $29,981, not including GST. The next lowest cost and highest ranked proposal was valued at $88,861. While executing the agreement amendment for the project, an issue with Sperling Hansen's insurance was noted. As per the RDCK insurance policy, landfill design is classified as a high-risk activity, and the policy requires $2 million of commercial general liability coverage and professional liability coverage of $5 million per claim and a $10 million aggregate. Sperling Hansen currently holds commercial general liability coverage in the amount of $5 million per claim and $10 million aggregate, which meets the RDCK requirement. Their professional liability coverage is in the amount of $5 million per claim, but only 5 million in aggregate, which does not meet the insurance policy requirements. Their deductible does meet the RDCK requirement. So when asked if Sperling Hansen could increase their professional liability coverage to a $10 million aggregate, it was determined that this would come at a cost of over $15,000 to the consulting firm, which is about 50% of the total project cost. As a result, if Sperling Hansen was required to meet this level of insurance without the RDCK covering the additional cost, they would not accept this project, requiring RDCK to seek another proponent to take on the project at a higher cost. It is possible, however, that other proponents may be in a similar situation where acquiring the needed $10 million in aggregate would have a negative financial impact on their proposal. As this project is considered high risk under the RDCK insurance policy, board approval of an insurance modification or direction to cover the increased cost of the insurance is required. The modification request is to reduce the professional liability in aggregate coverage amount from $10 million to $5 million. Under the MIABC recommended insurance coverage guidance document, high-risk activities should meet a number of conditions, but none of these are applicable for this specific project. As such, staff proposes that the reduction of professional liability aggregate coverage is reasonable. Should the board not approve the insurance modification, the RDCK will either need to cover the increased costs of the additional insurance for Sperling Hansen, or the project will need to be put on hold until suitable proponent can be secured, which will result in a delay in the closure work and likely increased project costs. Regarding financial considerations, if the reduction of insurance is improved, there would be no additional cost to the RDCK and we can move forward with the project on schedule. If the reduction of insurance is not approved, the RDCK would need to pay an additional estimated $15,000 to cover the insurance cost, bringing the project value to $45,000, not including GST. Approving the insurance modification is the best value option for the RDCK, with the total project value being up to $29,981. Alternatively, staff could investigate awarding the contract to the next lowest cost and highest ranked proposal at a total cost of $88,861. However, this would result in a delay of the project, would cost the RDCK more, and there's still the potential that this next proponent in line would not have the insurance required to meet the RDCK insurance policy. So with that, we have our options. So the first option is that the board accept the insurance modification for Sperling Hansen to reduce the aggregate amount from 10 million to 5 million. The advantages of this: it allows the project to continue on schedule. It allows the RDCK to continue our strong working relationship with Sperling Hansen, and the project would remain low. There's no disadvantages noted in this option. The second option is that the board does not approve the insurance modification and instead directs staff to include the additional cost of increasing the insurance coverage amount in the payment terms of the agreement amendment for the closure planning project. The advantages of this: it allows the RDCK to continue our working relationship with Sperling Hansen, and the project cost would still remain well below the next lowest cost and highest ranked proposal. The disadvantages of this option is the project schedule would be slightly delayed to revise the agreement amendment, have Sperling Hansen secure the increased insurance coverage, and provide revised certificate of insurance before starting any work. And also, this would increase the overall cost to the RDCK by approximately $15,000. So our recommendation is that the board accept the insurance modification for the in aggregate coverage of professional liability reduced from $10 million to $5 million. Thank you, and we'll send it back to the chair.
Thank you. I do have a speaker list. I've got Director Davidoff, Director Vandenberg. Go ahead, Director Davidoff.
Thank you, Chair. A comment and then a question. Liability is something that I think we've learned a lot about with the HB Mines situation that we've been dealing with for many years. I have a question, and I see, I don't know if Stuart's still on the line because he's on the board of IMABC, but as a former representative to MIABC, like, when we're dealing with a contractor who's cheaper, but doesn't carry the aggregate liability levels that other engineering firms might be carrying. I guess my question is that we know we're getting the work done more cheaply, but at the end of the day, what are other RDs and municipalities doing when it comes to addressing their landfills? Who are they utilizing? And what are their coverages? Like for us to make a decision to reduce the amount of aggregate liability that an engineering firm should be carrying, because it's deemed a high risk liability, to me is untenable. We should be dealing with a company that has massive aggregate liability, not minimum aggregate liability. So I guess my question is it would be to Stuart, but I don't see him on the line anymore because he's on the MIABC board. But I think, I'd like to know which engineering firms are other municipalities using with landfill projects, with high risk projects. Are they shaving? Are they awarding contracts based on giving people a break on the aggregate liability that they're supposed to be carrying?
Well, thank you, Director David. I think we get the gist of your question, and I'll start with Amy, and Stuart's in the room, and then he can finish hopefully provide an answer.
Thank you.
So through the chair, we, Resource Recovery has not gone through an exercise to investigate what other regional districts are requiring, and that would be something more for corporate admin to look at. Sperling Hansen designs and monitors and does engineering services for landfills across BC. I think they're probably the main landfill engineering firm. They work for Vancouver, they work for CSRD, they work for the EK, the RDKB. They're a very well-used engineering firm, and we have used them extensively for the Creston landfill. They were part of the standing offer group, and at that time, that level of insurance was not required when we originally did that procurement. And so this is a level of insurance beyond what was originally required, and based on them not having it, it's likely a level of insurance not being required in other landfill projects.
Thank you. CEO Horn, you're in the room.
Through the chair, I think one thing that we'd like to point out is that professional engineers are governed by their associations as well. So there's a responsibility for them to keep up with their professional development and make sure that they're meeting their continuing education requirements there. So we do rely partly on that. The second thing is, just in terms of, what other RDs are doing. Granted, it's a different project, but we're dealing with another high-risk contract that we're talking to a consultant over, and they've repeatedly shown us other projects where they've gone down in their aggregate because they just can't afford it. So all they would be doing is if they got this insurance coverage, all they would be doing is passing 100% of the cost on us, or they wouldn't accept the project. And that's what it's come to with a lot of contractors is come to the point where they don't need the work. So if you want them to get that higher level insurance, they'll pay the premium, but then that premium just goes right on top of the contract and comes here. And when it comes to the work that we're evaluating, what we decided to bring to the committee and then the board when it comes to these high risk activities and what we see as maybe being reasonable to come down to that medium risk level is, are people out there doing something on the ground? Are they digging up dirt? Are they using machinery? Are they around the public? Or are they sitting behind a desk, analyzing documents, drafting reports? And although this is considered a high-risk activity with that landfill design piece, it'll be the work done after the fact that could be more high risk. And that's what we're going to start to evaluate what we're going to take on with respect to insurance coverage. But $5 million is still a lot of money. This is something where we wouldn't bring to you if we didn't think it was reasonable to consider. At that point, we would negotiate with the contractor and say, no, we know that our committee and board are going to fight on this. and accept this level of risk. So you go out and get the premium, let us know how much it's gonna cost, and maybe we'll bring that back and say, this is what this project's gonna cost in order to keep that 10 million.
Thank you. So I've got Director Vanderberg and then Director Page.
Great, thank you.
And if you have a supplemental, Director David, we'll come back to you.
Through the chair. So the RFP was issued in July of 2024. So my question is around the policy to do with our RFPs, and in particular, because this is rated as a high risk. So if we're putting an RFP together and our policy is with a high risk, that this is the type of coverage that we need, then it's clear to them what they need to come back with. If our next lowest proponent at 88,000 includes the 10 million, why is it that their numbers include 10 million? The SHA didn't build the 10 million in, although that's a policy. So my question is around, is there a policy, and was it clearly articulated as part of the RFP requirement? That's my first question.
I believe, Amy, I think you answered that one because that wasn't the policy at that time.
Well, this is July 2024.
Yeah, what's that?
Through the chair,
Well,
the
after first one.
original, the RFP, I did not know if it's included. So the RFP would have been for the scope of work particularly, but it was only issued to the standing offer group. So there could have been components that weren't detailed in the scope of work because the original standing offer agreement already had all of that documentation in place. They'd already been pre-vetted for that, for what was originally in the standing offer group. When I don't know if Heidi's still in here. I think the standing offer group was from a number of years ago. I want to say 22. So, I don't off the top of my head know if the level of insurance was specified in this particular. Usually in a regular RFP or procurement, that the insurance requirement would be very clearly stated. The standing offer group scope might have been slightly modified.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
May I add to Amy's comment for a minute, if I may? I wrote the RFP.
Okay.
So through the chair, because the standing offer group had the 2022 insurance requirements in those original standing offers. In the RFP, I added that if the proponent was a successful consultant, they would need to meet that high risk level of insurance. So it was included in very clear language within the RFP itself. Thank you.
Okay. Supplemental, if I may. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's all about policy. And high risk, medium risk, the explanation that the CAO gave, I'm satisfied with. But this is causing a level of confusion. If you have a policy based on here are the requirements for high risk, then that's what goes in the RFP. Medium risk, then that's what goes in the RFP. My point is that the policy is unclear and it was unclearly communicated. And so now we're dealing with, a reduction of $15,000, even though it's a high risk. It's confusing. I still don't know if the backup proponent at 88,000 had the 10 million in or not. I don't know the answer to that question. So if you want us to devalue or take some risk on by taking away some of the insurance, then we need to tighten up the policy around those RFPs, is my comment. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment. And Stuart would like to make a...
So through the chair, yes, the other proponent did have the 10 million. It was stated in the report. However, there is a policy that says the committee and then the board can make this change in order to reduce the cost of the contract. So that's the policy. What you're debating now is part of our policy when approaching insurance requirements. In order to making sure that we're getting the best value for the work, this is part of policy that, but if the board, if it's waived, our policy is it needs board approval by the committee.
Thank you. So I've got Director Page, Director Weatherhead, and Director Watson.
Thanks. So I get from the reporting a timeline that happened here around having the standing offer groups, having a conceptual plan put forward to close the cusp, and then having additional scope brought in that include detailed design for the landfill closure, which as per policy is high risk on our side. But as it says in the report here, when looking at this project in specifics and comparing to what MIABC is doing in terms of categorizing high risk, they're looking for, will there be a bunch of people on it? Will there be new construction over 3 million? Will there be a high risk of bodily injury? And that's high risk. So my question around policy is, do we want to do some work with our RSK insurance policy and realign where these high categories are? Because right now we're just saying landfill design, always high risk, and then bringing it to committee to discuss further so you can make evaluations. But can we get a little bit more nuanced in our policy to give staff a bit more in that direction if need be?
Thank you, Director Page and CEO Horn.
Yeah, through the chair, when our original risk matrix was brought to the board years ago, it was highly conservative. So it could be something that, perhaps that's not what we're talking about generally, but it is something that you could give direction to staff to take a look at aligning it more with MIABC's matrix so that you didn't have to worry about, or you could delegate these types of decisions to staff to say that in circumstances where it makes sense, something like this could be considered a medium risk activity.
Well, I guess my question, just for clarification, you know your guys' policy. Do you feel your policy as a whole needs to be refreshed and realigned, or is this just one of those gaps that we then have to debate on the merits of whether or not doing a closure plan should include $10 million worth of?
Through the chair, I do think there's benefit in taking a look at what high risk activities we identified.
Yeah.
Because those have to come to the board if we're going to change the insurance requirements. If there's something a little bit lower that needs a further reduction in insurance, I can approve that. So medium risk to a low risk, for example, I can approve the reduction in those insurance requirements under a policy. However, I can't approve the high risk to the medium risk. So maybe we need to look at what qualifies as a high risk activity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, maybe just as a comparison, high risk activity, we've got landfill design here, which we're talking about, and in staff's opinion, in my opinion, could be considered a medium risk. The other high risk activity that I always highlight that's right next to it is working with ammonia in our refrigeration plants.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that those things are on par with each other, right? They're different.
Thank you. Director Weatherhead.
Thank you, Chair. I see as it's stated that the 5 million, is more closely aligned with the risks of this closure planning design project. I'd like to move this motion, and then I just have one question.
Sorry. Just before you move the motion, I had a speaker list.
You still
and Director Watson, were you on that list?
I was on that list, and I was only going to make 2 notes. One was Director Page noted that the report actually addresses under MIABC what to consider, and this would be fine under them because of that high risk difference between conceptual and design and actual construction. So this qualifies under that. And the second note was the question was around the second bid that came in. This bid is 29,000. The bid that came in and after that was 88,000. That did include that 10 million liability. So we're obviously, if we went to that one, we'd be going over and above what we need to. So I'm in favor of this motion.
You move the motion. Second. And we've got Director Newell seconded.
Just one question.
I think we've already had discussion, but I'll call for discussion.
Oh, this was just based on the S188. We allowed 100,000 for that. So this is the first charge against that budget.
So let me just be clear. You're moving the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
we had a second.
Yes.
So we had pre-discussion before you moved. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Anybody opposed?
Yeah, I'm opposed, Chair.
We don't record opposed in committee. Okay, David. Okay. Hey, item number 6.
So, Chair.
Yes.
Do we want to do some direction to staff to look at the policy high risk language?
I think that was noted by staff that they are going to take a look at for
Sure, that wouldn't be a resource recovery.
No, that's across all boards, so you
That-
can
that's-
send a note,
Yeah,
and it would be a motion that comes to the board.
Okay, so I would make that motion.
It's procedurally, it's not a resource recovery motion, it would be a board motion, so just send a note making a request and staff will work it onto an agenda.
Noted.
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem.
Item number 6, Creston Landfill and Compost Operating Contracts, East Subregion. And that's
Okay.
for Nathan again, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, the purpose of this report is to seek approval to issue a request for proposal for the Creston landfill operations and the Creston compost operations and maintenance, which will combine these contracts under a single service agreement. Staff are also requesting approval of a new short-term contract for the landfill operations and a contract extension for compost operations, both for GFL Environmental, in order to provide additional time for the combined operations RFP process. The Creston landfill and compost facility sites are currently operated under 2 separate contracts, and both contracts are currently held by GFL. The landfill contract is set to expire on March 31st, 2025, and has no remaining extensions available. The compost facility contract is set to expire on April 9th, 2025, and has 2 optional 1-year extensions available. The contract terms were designed to expire around the same time so that the contracts could eventually be combined into a single operations contract. Staff are seeking board approval to issue an RFP for a single combined contract to operate both the landfill and compost facility. In order to provide ample time for potential new contractors to secure staff and equipment after contract award and prior to a new contract start date, staff are also requesting approval to direct award a new 6-month contract for landfill operations and a 5-month, 20-day extension to the compost facility contract. Both contracts would retain the same terms and conditions of the existing contracts. The 2 contracts would then expire on the same date, September 30th, 2025, and the new combined contract would commence on October 1st, 2025. Staff have observed that securing staff in the Creston Valley can be very difficult, and new equipment orders can take longer than 6 months before delivery. If the 6-month contract extension is not granted, it's likely that the RDCK would limit the number of quality proposals received for the RFP. The short time period between procurement and contract start date would be a barrier to participation, especially for smaller companies who may not have adequate staff or equipment readily available. Ensuring that bidders do not face unnecessary barriers should expand the pool of eligible proponents and maximize competition. As the Creston landfill contract is out of allowable extensions, the award of a new 6-month contract to GFL would need to be completed under the non-competitive procurement method within the RDCK's purchasing policy. Staff feel this is a reasonable request in that it is a short-term contract, and providing a longer period between the combined operations contract RFP closing date and the new contract start date will ensure a more fair procurement process, likely resulting in more competitive bids and a lower overall cost to the RDCK. Regarding financial considerations, costs for both the Creston landfill and compost facility operations and maintenance contracts are included in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan, in Service S186 East Resource Recovery and Service A119 East Compost, respectively. Although there may need to be some amendments based on recent annual adjustment calculations that were higher than anticipated. Combining the 2 contracts into a single contract may result in a lower overall cost, as there would be potential for equipment and staff sharing between the 2 operations. If the new direct award for a 6-month landfill contract is provided to GFL, the associated cost of that new contract is estimated to be $36,339 per month, or $218,034 for the entire 6-month term. If the contract extension is provided to GFL for the compost facility contract, the associated cost is estimated to be $15,229 per month, or $86,659 for the 5-month, 20-day period. These rates are based on the 2024 rates with the annual adjustment calculations factored in. So we have a number of recommendations here and options. So the first recommendation, the first first item is the board directs staff to issue a single request for proposal to combine the landfill and compost contracts. The advantages being a single contractor overseeing both operations will be a simpler process in terms of prime contractor designations and safety considerations associated with that process, and for contract oversight and management of staff. As well, there may potentially be cost savings by combining the contracts. There's no disadvantages noted in doing it this way. The other option there is that the board directs staff to issue separate requests for proposals for the landfill and compost facility operations. There's no advantages noted in that. The disadvantages would be there's additional time needed to prepare and execute separate RFPs. If different companies are awarded the contracts, there's potential for logistical problems. We may have to pay a higher cost to have separate contracts, as there won't be any equipment or staffing sharing. And having two separate prime contractors on a site with some overlapping work areas would require some additional safety considerations. The next item.
Thank you. We'll deal with the recommendations one at a time.
Sure.
And rather having questions posed to staff, to shorten up the time, we seem to be wandering completely off the subject. So we have recommendation number one. Does somebody want to move recommendation number one? Dr. Jacques?
I think that's a bit of an unfair approach because we haven't had a sub-regional discussion. I'll move this for discussion, and then I have necessarily need to involve the other two because of procedure questions, but I'll move the recommendation as written.
Okay. Well,
for discussion.
Yeah. If you want to refer, if you haven't had discussion on it at East, that would be the appropriate thing to do.
I want to.
Okay. A seconder?
Point out some points. So
yes, we've got a seconder.
Okay, so now I have to narrow my scope of what I'm going to bring up, but I don't mind trying this because simplification is sometimes good. If we go this way and later we decided we wanted to have a region-wide composting or organics diversion, this will work against that unless we're very clear in making sure the bidder separates their allocation within the landfill operation and the organics. There's always a chance to be some distortion of those numbers, and I don't want to be down the road having everyone else question saying, oh, you lowballed that, you're not giving us enough money for a bigger region-wide organics diversion. So there's a risk to going this way. The other risk that does exist to going this way of combining, so it could be a small operator in the area who will keep the bigger operator a little more honest, saying, yeah, I'm willing to do that little bit of work because it did work independently previously. And sometimes having a little competition, saying, well, you get 100% of the work, and maybe you get 80%. We're going to keep you honest on the other 20 because some small operator might put in a better price. And every few years, you need to look at it. I'm willing to take this path, but I would like to make sure that staff put out the combined RFP really quick so that if we do get one what could lead to monopoly bid, we can cancel that and revert to two separate contracts. So long as this RFP doesn't take 4 or 5 months to get out, and then we're slammed, we say, well, the only option is to accept a single bid or try to extend beyond our policy, extend sole source contracts another 6 months. So willing to try if it's really quick. Procedurally, I view this as participants only, and I think the other two would be all votes. So I'd like to know, that's where I want to drift to the other two, whether these go as a block or whether they're necessarily separated into participants only on this one, all vote for the others, because there's contract extension the others. If I don't know if Amy can answer that or Stuart.
So correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is in committee, it's all vote. At the board table, it's participants.
That's what I want to know, what'll happen at the board. But in committee, this can be participants only. In my view, the first one can be participants only. And my peers haven't had a chance to look at this, my sub-regional peers. So is the first one participants only?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, operation administration of the service, it would be participants only before.
In committee?
At the board, the chair, everything in committee is all vote.
That's all. That's
director was over to.
Okay. So provided this is a really quick turnaround on the RFP, so we have a chance to reconsider it, I'm good with trying this.
Okay, so motion on the table, we had a seconder. And your question is discussion.
No further questions from me. Willing to try this.
Okay. Any further discussion on this?
I was on.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry about that.
No, yeah, and a couple of good points that Gary brought forward, I hadn't considered, but I was going to suggest to block vote on the whole thing, because timing is critical in this, and this is the second time reading it through. And I agree with Gary that we need to move on this, so I was just going to expedite it by blocking it altogether. However, that has been, we now are dealing with them one at a time. That's fine.
Yeah, to the CEO, can we move them all as a block, even though we moved the first one and seconded?
Yeah, through the chair, you could withdraw the motion, with the example of seconder, and then move all three to block.
I'll withdraw it if that's easier.
Okay.
We'll get to the same.
Seconder? Page?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I move save that time. I move all of your recommendations as well.
All three as a block. And you will second that all three as a block?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, discussion.
Just that the first one in board would be, what do you call?
Participants.
Participants, yeah. Correct?
At board, I believe they will be participants only, but again, I'll take direction from the CAO and committee. It's all vote. And at the board table, I don't know if we can move them as a block, we'll move them individually. And it'll be participants only, or will it be?
Through the chair, first one participants only, the next two are agreements / contracts, so that's board. All those, yeah.
Okay, is that your answer to your question? Yeah. Okay, and further discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing no opposition, carried. We're item number 7, and Elaine Hamilton will start off. She might have a little bit of a problem with her voice or whatever, and we'll get maybe Amy to carry on if she has a problem. Go ahead, Ian. Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you, and through the chair. So the first part of this report discusses some recent regulatory changes. Is the Health, Safety, and Reclamation Code that kind of guides activities at mine sites was amended with changes that will affect our operations at the HB facility. So there are now 6 new fairly detailed reports that are required. 4 of those reports also require staff to complete early engagement with First Nations in an effort to incorporate Indigenous knowledge into each one of those 4 reports. So this process, although new and we don't know too much at this point, it could be a significant undertaking depending on the number of First Nations that wish to meet with us and share information for these reports. Other changes in the code include increased testing of the emergency response plan and making efforts to engage with First Nations on like general emergency planning for the site. There are also a number of changes around closed facilities now being eligible for potential reduction of post-closure monitoring. And there's now the possibility of a full release of permit obligations under the Mines Act, which could be a significant benefit to our longer-term operations if we could achieve that. On to the kind of contract items in this report. We're about 2 years into a 4 or 5 year, maybe longer post-closure process at the facility right now. SLR Consulting currently acts as the facility's environmental monitor and has also been leading our environmental permit-related projects at the site, while SRK Consulting acts as the facility's engineer of record, and they also provide us with some kind of general engineering and design supports as needed. Both of these contracts are due to expire before the end of this year, and both consultants are in the middle of a number of high-priority multi-year projects. To provide kind of continuity through these important projects and get us to the end of this important active care phase of closure, staff are recommending awarding new contracts to both firms under the non-competitive purchase model in the RDCK's purchasing policy. Staff are proposing to direct award to SLR for a 3-year contract, and they have provided a proposal and detailed cost estimate, which is included in attachment A. Should a new 3-year contract to SLR be approved, the high-level scopes of work for the contract term are detailed on page 3, with items in italics being those ongoing multi-year projects that we'd like to continue. And for SRK, they have also provided a proposal for a 2-year term, which is included in attachment C. And SRK has proposed a 2-year term instead of our usual 3-year term, just due to a business preference of theirs. So should the new 2-year contract be approved for SRK, their high-level scopes of work within the report start on page 4. And again, the multi-year projects are outlined in italics. So for both SLR and SRK, staff feel that providing them with new contracts meet those outlined requirements for the non-competitive purchase model within our policy, in that due to the complex nature of this active care phase and the required continuation of projects that are already underway, staff believe that only these 2 firms are able to meet the requirements of tasks for the upcoming several years. It's not in the interest of dam safety and therefore the safety of the public and the environment to change consultants at this critical phase of closure. There will also be cost savings in place by keeping these consultants on and not needing to have new consultants spend significant time updating models and reviewing historical documents or design files in order to get up to speed. For SRK's proposed 2-year contract, the board approved a insurance modification for SRK earlier this year in April. Again, this is another one of those high-risk contracts, so it does require board approval. So the modification that was passed previously increases the deductible on that professional liability insurance from $50,000 to $500,000 and reduces the in aggregate coverage amount from $10 million to $5 million. So SRK has outlined that they would still have these same limits with their insurance, with their insurer. So staff are requesting that that same insurance modification also would apply to this new contract. For financial considerations, most of the costs associated with the proposed new agreements have already been included in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan for S187. All costs, including any new items or tasks from 2024 that could roll over, will be included in that draft 2025 to 29 financial plan. For SLR, the total contract value for the proposed 3-year term is $359,800. The annual costs for the contract term range from $90,400 per year to $135,700 per year. And over time, SLR's contract costs for the proposed term are lower than anticipated, as their qualified environmental professionals are recommending that we slowly reduce the environmental monitoring frequencies on site. And for SRK's, the total contract value for the proposed term is $513,021. Within their proposal for hourly rates, SRK has also asked that the set rates include an annual adjustment for CPI plus an additional 2% with promotions, which seems reasonable given we usually see like much larger increases at the end of a term, and that rate increases for promotions can be expected over the term, as well as there's increased business costs and inflation. The estimated annual cost for SRK for the proposed 2-year contract is $383,280 in 2025 and $129,740 in 2026. And so for SRK, part of the reason that this next year has had quite a high cost is that it includes $87,800 of new costs related to those 6 new reports that are required with that regulatory change, and $121,600 for a drilling program that was in the budget for this year but is being deferred to 2025. Early conservative year-end projections for 2024 indicate there could be around 146,000 remaining in the S187 budget for the HB facility that could roll over into 2025. There's also a possibility that some of those new reporting requirements could be deferred or a portion of into 2026 to alleviate some of the higher costs in 2025. The draft contracts are included in the attachments, and I'm getting quite hoarse, so I don't think I'll go into the options, but thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And so, has she finished or?
Through the chair, I think that the options are pretty well detailed.
Sure.
Okay, we've got a recommendation number one. Does somebody want to move that?
I was on the speakers list. I'll move both recommendations.
Oh, wait a minute, excuse me. Both, are we not having a speaker?
No, we can.
Because-
Yeah, we would.
I was first on it.
He did wave his hand a while ago and yeah. So you're moving both recommendations as a
Yeah,
block?
I think from the previous discussion, we can move them both and then have discussion. So I move.
Okay.
Recommendation.
Yeah, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Yeah, Director Page. Okay, I have Director Watson and then Director Lockwood.
Thank you. I'm just curious about that. I totally understand in regards to, sorry, I'll flip back to my screen. I like looking at the lane, and if someone else can answer, we'll let them. In regards to the engagement of First Nations from an emergency context, I completely understand why we need consultants to be able to have those technical conversations on this facility. So I'm not going to question that in any way. Grateful for it. Graham's on the list too.
Okay.
My question is just more so related to, we have to do engagement with First Nations as emergency service responders and managers regardless. So I'm just wondering if there is overlap in the emergency department, emergency services department, should there be an event? How does that overlap with the consultants? So we're not over engaging the First Nations, and we're simplifying where we can without negating the fact that it's very technical in terms of what we would be talking about in this regard. I hope that was clear.
So,
Through the chair, I've already engaged with the emergency services team on our updated emergency preparedness and response plan, because they have been historically involved in our annual test and review of the plan. And we have the duty officer team out to site, and the EOC would respond to any major event that we have. So they have been involved in this process all along. So I'll certainly touch base with Dan and Nora about if they are working on engagement as well. But there certainly would be a portion of overlap in that sense around notifications and that process.
Thank you. And supplemental?
Go ahead.
So again, Elaine, I'm sorry, I did read in the report that most of this is covered in what was budgeted for Service 187, but I did see that there was some carry forward, obviously, because the province has added requirements that we didn't know when we approved that budget. Is there the number I couldn't find giving the difference between what we will be looking at in 2025 as part of the budget to accommodate for this?
So the new costs for those reports in the code is 88,000, and then the rollover is 122. I haven't fully finished the budget estimate for the site yet, as part of the draft budget process, because some of our other costs have decreased. Some of the minor monitoring costs were decreasing with time. We've also decreased our staff involvement on site. So we used to go out weekly and now we're going out monthly. So there are some costs that we'll need to shuffle, and Amy and I haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss those in detail yet.
Okay, and final, just based on that. So because the motions don't indicate a financial plan amendment requirement, I assumed that we were good for 2024 and we can do the budget for 2025 and we'll be fine. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I've got Director Lockwood.
Thank you. I don't know how this fits into the actual motion, but this is on the report that I have. a couple of questions. So we have in here, under italics, final closure report under both of them. How many times are we going to see this? Final closure report. When I read the report, there's always, unless an extension is needed. Do we not have a hard timeline by the province to say this needs to be done? Or are we just going to be allowed to, because it's just going to keep costing money. I don't know how many millions of dollars we're going to keep going down the rabbit hole with this. I don't know where that.
So do we have an answer?
Through the chair, so the final closure report is in both scopes of work because it includes both environmental and design components, and so neither firm has the appropriate qualifications to be writing that whole report. The final closure report is due to the province in December of 2026. So that's what we're working towards. We just have left it as unless an extension is needed in the event we have some, widespread flooding or something that would set back the kind of clock on where we're at right now with closure. So we need to meet, revegetation requirements and a number of other environmental conditions in order to submit that report. So there's always like a very slim possibility that we could need an extension on that timeline.
Supplemental? Thank you. And I don't know, through the chair to staff, this is something that we need to be going back to the government and they keep throwing stuff at us that we need more. We need more. As we see in the report, new code. It makes it look like it's us hitting our taxpayers, where it's actually the provincial government putting regulations on us that's costing them and more burden without saying, okay, this happened here, this is what we want you to come to, that they're always throwing stuff. I can see that in 2035 that this is still on the books here. I'm going to stop that.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Lockwood. Staff had any response to that, or?
There's nothing to respond to.
Yeah, realize that. Okay, so I've got Director Graham. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm no expert on any of this stuff, but as a business person, I will say I'm fundamentally opposed to direct award contracts. I think as private business people in the area, like they should be given opportunities through the BC bid process for any kind of request for proposal. So I would not vote in support of this just based on that, because I'm hearing staff say that these are the only two companies, but I don't know that. And if we haven't put that out for bid, then how can any of us know that? So for that reason, even though it always makes sense that the incumbent in a position in a long term would always have the advantage because they would know what's going on and that would become part of their competitive bid. And so that's really just my only comment from a business perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was a comment. And Director Page, go ahead.
I just don't know if I heard clarity to Director Chair Watson's comment about combining engagement opportunities. At least that's how I understood it. If we have more than one or two subject matters across the field of responsibility, that we might want to try and turn it around to engaging with First Nations and hearing things specific to that, versus here we have some reporting requirements and casting a wide field and then within another service doing something similar again. And I'm not sure I really heard an answer to that question.
Elaine did indicate she's going to circle back to Dan and Nora to look at how best to do that.
Right.
In terms of like our general engagement on emergency management is pretty broad, and we have a report tomorrow looking at how do we work together so we're not over engaging. Elaine indicated she will take this one and also work with them on that, given the technicality of this one. It's not as simple, just include it. So
I get that.
I'm happy with Elaine's response that she's going to check in with
Okay, I just, Dennis, for clarity.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Oh, sorry, I'll check chat. Graham spoke, looks good.
Okay, we're moving them as a block. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See no opposition, carried.
Graham was opposed.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, Lakeside Recycling Depot License of Occupation. And McCain, you got the floor.
Do you want to speak to the through the chair? So this was an item that was, I think, originally brought to you guys in maybe February. The value of the lease was almost 64,000. There were some questions about the rates. We went back and negotiated or got some clarity with the city staff. We did have the rate brought down to 58,000, which we brought back in July, I believe, to report, but we neglected to get authorization to actually sign the document. So simply because it's an agreement, we're back here to ask for authorization for the chair and CEO to sign the document. I'll move.
Chair, okay, good. Second.
Okay, second. Discussion?
Just noting the motion doesn't actually say that. That the board authorized the renewal of the license of occupation, but it doesn't say, and the chair and the corporate officer are authorized to sign. That's what you need, right? Yes. Yeah, so I'll have that.
We come back next week?
We need the rest of it too, but we do need that one part. Yes, thank you very much.
So there's an amendment to that?
Friendly amendment is accepted by the mover that it includes, and further, that the chair and corporate officer are authorized to sign.
Okay, and that was a friendly amendment. Any officer, you got a friendly amendment? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. Item number 9, I will be making a motion to defer to November board meeting, but I'll ask Amy to expand on that. Why the motion to defer?
Yes, thank you. So we are looking to negotiate a few terms. The corporate admin has some comments about the license of occupation that the village of Selma passed on. Those are undergoing some legal review, and we added it to the agenda in the hopes that we might have a chance to have the agenda or the agreement for you to see. They are meeting with council, their legal counsel this week, so we unfortunately didn't get it in time. So we'll bring that back in November with the agreed with the agreement.
So I make the motion to refer. A seconder.
Chair, point of order.
Go ahead.
Is this an item that belongs in camera, not in open?
No.
Just wondering, because we're dealing with the legal agreement through the license of occupation. Just wondering.
Sure.
There's a motion on the table to refer, and it's seconded and proprietary referral.
No.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. Public time. Any public on the line? I see no public in the room. Just wait a couple of seconds here if anybody wants to unmute. Okay. No public participation and a motion to adjourn. So moved. Dr. Weatherhead and Page.